Greetings, and welcome to the Public Library of Foundrin. I don't believe I've seen you in here before. Feel free to look through our collection, though I do suggest new readers this volume, The World as It Stands in the Year 511 Post-Blight. It's a fabulous story detailing the state of affairs of the regions and their histories. Let's begin, shall we? The earliest historical records that exist are Brookish inscriptions carved into stone. They tell of a dragon, large and powerful. From what we can gather, this figure is the mythical Glacier, the first dragon. It is likely that her size and intelligence are greatly exaggerated. The texts claim that she created the Brook and forced them to mine for her. Shortly thereafter, the first Thup civilizations started to pop up, and they corroborate the Brook legends of Glacier the Ice Dragon as a slave driver, forcing weaker races to mine gold and precious gems for her. Scholars agree that she is in actuality most likely a symbol for an early tribal queen who relied on the fear of this dragon to force their subjects to follow orders. Then their descendants created what we call the Glacian Empire, which has since collapsed into the Rhineland, Terran Empire, and Thuplands. The Glacian Empire waged several campaigns across the continent, and at one point controlled, or was allied with, all lands their side of the Yig Canal system. The Terran Empire, our sister nation, was split off from the Glacian Empire shortly after the Blight, and consists of humans who were once under the thumb of Varthis, a real-life figure who overthrew the Glacian dynasty and became the ruler in her stead. However, after his death, the different cultures under the empire no longer had reason to remain connected. The Terrans felt as though they should rule, but couldn't back their claim over the other factions. They also felt themselves too culturally distinct from the Victorol to join. The Brook, most commonly referred to as Frost Giants by outsiders, felt they didn't need the other factions, and split off to create their own law and lands, lacking the law aspect. They created the Rhineland, a lawless tundra of savage raiders and herders. The raiders were once a great scourge to the whole continent. They were slavers and advanced in brutality. After the fall of the Glacian Empire, however, their glory has diminished, and these days they rarely leave their wasteland. The herders are the real cultural hub of the Brook, but are far further poleward, and content to be left alone. They have a rich oral tradition and craftsmanship. Despite no longer possessing the technology required for metallurgy, they have, in its stead, near perfected the creation of stone tools, and have an uncountable use for every part of the reindeer, their main herd animal. The Thup and subsequent races, Tharg and Thul, are the indigenous inhabitants of the Coollands. They have a long history of agriculture, crafts, and brewing. They also appear to be the ones responsible for the common language, as well as several writing forms. If legend is to be believed, they had the largest library and source of knowledge ever to exist, locked away in their walking mountain. The Thup were instrumental in forming intercontinental relations, and they currently share their lands with many races in the Coollands. On the opposite side of the continent, archaeologists start to find evidence of the first Vahi landfall, the arrival of the ocean-sailing Vahi people. They appear to have fled over from an unidentified continent that no one has been able to contact since. They leave behind only artifacts and oral tradition, as they hadn't yet created their own written language. They spread far up and down the coast, creating trading settlements, but never venturing too far inland. Many of our Vahi artifacts can be found in the city of Hanua, as it seems to have existed as a trading hub long before the city was officially founded. The Vahi seem to have been the major trading power via coastal routes, eventually contacting even the Thuplands before the Murtuk traders. Something of interest that modern scholars have come to believe is that the Vahi survived as the Ikaikans and Keepers of the Flame after undergoing a massive shift in their culture. The Ikaika are a near-extinct order that ranged everywhere except the Glacian Empire. They were a semi-militant group interested in maintaining peaceful relations, until their skills were needed to quell the first waves of the Blight. A small religious subgroup, called the Keepers of the Flame, focused on arming the Ikaikans, and have remained as a source for some of the best metalworkers today. They can be found in every major city in their enclaves, where they can be traded with for their work. Prior to the Blight, there had been legends of the Ikaika felling great beasts called Endbringers. Scholars agree that these were apocryphal tales to give validity to their intercontinental sway, justifying their existence in a land that would otherwise not tolerate such a powerful and armed foreign presence. The Vahi also may have been the precursors to the Kaijin, found on the Thuppish side of the mountain coast, but were cut off from their Vahi cousins either by cultural disputes or the early Mir people. The Mir, a cat-like race, seem to have originally been solely isolated to the Dotark Mountains on the mountain coast, and the adjacent desert, though now they have a strong claim to any and all sea trade. They seem to have been nomadic tribes and pirates before the Blight, but without any trade to steal from, they decided to steal the trade routes themselves, and are currently the largest trade empire. There remains some nomadic Mir unaligned with the Tuk trading. Across the sea from the mountain coast, there live the Sanar on their distant island. They were relatively untouched by the Blight, and therefore have a much more continuous history. However, they are rather selective about the information that escapes their lands. From what we can piece together, they are ruled by the Crimson King, a dictator with complete control over every aspect of his kingdom. They are gifted crafters of luxury items. They produce unparalleled jewels, and have a strong trade agreement with the Mir Tuk traders. Now to the Abhan Peninsula. There have been very little study of the area due to the dense vegetation, innavigable plateaus, and territorial locals. Much of our information comes from secondary and tertiary sources, adventurers, anthropologists, and testimonials of slaves taken from there. Almost all this information is centuries old and difficult to corroborate. But from what we can gather, there are two people groups inhabiting the area. The Serpent People, or Nator, primarily come from the intersection of mountain and rainforest. The Idrons, or Lion People, occupy the rest of the rainforest. The Serpent People, who now journey the continent, peddling their alchemy, herbs, and such, were once very isolationist and rarely left the peninsula. There are so few Nator left, as they were the victims of a large genocide post-Blight. Some of the factors causing hatred was that their leader Revax was thought to be the primary architect of the Blight. This exacerbated their already dangerous reputation among the peoples of Atheros, as their history was one of a vicious cycle of violence against their own precursors. A movement that was mirrored by their claims of having murdered their own god. Flasan and the Kobolds are the occupying forces of the Palatine Mountains. Flasan is the only living elder dragon. He hibernates for years at a time, and there hasn't been a confirmed sighting in decades. His wild children, on the other hand, are a well-recorded menace in the mountains and nearby foothills. The Kobolds, or as they like to be called, the grandchildren of Flasan, are sentient dwellers of the mountain. They are of limited intelligence, though they were reported to aid humans during the Third Great Exodus, as they are fond of reminding any traveler they meet. They are to be considered dangerous, but you can try to barter passage by trading trinkets. Though they might leave you alone, note that you are definitely being watched. while they do not have confirmed legal boundaries, the land they claim can be called Vlatsia, which is a local term for dragon territory. And now the history of our people. Our precursors, the Veshtans, were once an elegant race, known for their beauty, art, and brutality. Scholars debate the real origin of the Veshtan people. Though they kept amazing records, many of them seem mytho-historical. They had a monarch much like our own, in that each figure would take the name of the previous ruler. Although there are never any records of when this occurred, likely intentionally done to give them an illusion of immortality. This monarch, or Veshta, was a tyrannical ruler to whom great magical deeds were attributed. She claims to have created several immense terraforming feats, herself with the aid of her magic, as well as created several races who interbred into humans as we know today. Now, most of the Veshtan civilization lies as ruins popping out of the snow. There are living Veshtans, but they live under the Borkdom, or as hermits in the tundra. Originally, our people were created as slaves to help build great architectural marvel, likely the true constructors of the Great Wall and Veshtan Palace. Over time, freed or escaped slaves would make it over the Palatine Mountains and into the Great Plains to farm. They formed several tribes and created their own mythologies and societies. There are many stories around this time of centaur people migrating from city-state to city-state, and they seem to have been the original occupants of the necropolis and several ruins scattered across the plains. In the year 2152 BB, the Great-Born Bork escaped from Veshtan lands and decided, for their protection, the tribes of humans needed a central governing system. And so began the Victorol Campaign, a movement led by the first Bork to quell tribal disputes by uniting under one federal banner. Over many years, tribe by tribe joined his cause or perished without his protection, eventually resulting in the Borkdom, a nation ruled by a central council of 12, each a representative of the 12 houses, the descendants of the most powerful tribes. These are the lawmakers of our great nation, and they make sure our society runs smoothly. Above these 12 is the Bork, a figure who has the final say on matters of state and international affairs. This covers the majority of active players relevant to the main history of Atheros.
Hey, it's your boy Beast from the East coming straight from the underground. Thanks to my artist and voice actor in this production, Colin Walker. All props to that boy. Find him if you can. He has no social media, so good luck. Hey, real talk right here. Our mission here is to create a tabletop role-playing setting of our own design, which you, the lovely viewer, can participate in. So comment, subscribe, hit the real subscribe button for notifications.